Hello and welcome to another episode of the CyberDudes podcast. I am Robin Thornton, and today's episode is one we've actually had in the hopper for a month or two now. We've not managed to get around to the editing, but we are pleased to release it to you today. The episode is an interview with phishing expert and consultant Cary Johnson. Kerry started his career actually as a geologist, but moved into the cybersecurity space some years ago, and since then helps some of Canada's largest companies and the government sector improve their phishing simulations. In today's episode, you will hear about why most companies who run their phishing simulations are actually doing it sort of wrong, the difference between a benchmark and a baseline, and we'll be digging in a little bit into who the real charlatans are in the cybersecurity influencer world. So all that and more coming up after the jump. Okay, this week we are privileged to be joined by cybersecurity sleuth and phishing aficionado, Cary Johnson. Cary, very nice to have you with us. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm doing well, thanks. Hope you're doing well too.
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Getting a little warm, but managing with it. Cary, just dive straight in. Tell us about kind of you, what you do, what your aim is in cybersecurity. I mean, we've been connected on LinkedIn for a little while now, and we share some of the same kind of opinions and ethos on things. But you're quite outspoken with like the views. It's a good thing. Pushing a counter kind of culture set of thoughts on there, but I think ones that need to be heard. So
yeah, so I'm kind
you?
of in a tricky situation. So I run a very high touch sort of niche market service. So like what I do, no one's really doing. So it's a little difficult for me to sort of point out what I'm doing without highlighting some of the shortcomings that I'm addressing. So I kind of struggle with how do I come across the right way on LinkedIn and various social media sites and not sort of rub people the wrong way. But fact is, what I do is I run a unique service that basically sits above your security awareness platform. So it's independent of security awareness training platforms or human risk management. And it provides an auditing service that actually measures incremental impact of your phishing awareness training from scientifically created baselines, which nobody is doing. So what I'm addressing is the two main issues in the industry that I've come across over the years. And I've been doing phishing simulations since they had to be done on email marketing tools, before there were even platforms. It's the exact same platform. It's not an innovation, by the way. So what I address is the two main issues, gaps in the security awareness industry. The first one is they self-assess, right? So they're running their own programs and they're providing the narrative and the performance metrics to grade their own product. And right there is the problem, right? And what that leads to is a lack of effectiveness metrics. They don't measure impact, they measure activity. And what they're doing, in essence, is they are playing, in my opinion, it's a bit of a social engineering thing, if you want to call it that. They're playing on what psychologists call the activity bias of human nature. And that is that, yeah, when we're doing crap, we feel like we're progressing. And if you look at their metrics, the way they create them, they're all vertical siloed metrics that speak specifically and vertically and disparately, if you want, to each individual simulation as they run. But they don't tie together to provide a horizontal or a longitudinal framework to tell you if you're improving, what kind of incremental impact you have that's going on. And they don't start from true baselines because they're constantly shifting the complexity level. So you're never comparing apples to apples. So that's what I do. I come in and I sit above these programs. And with a lot of my clients, they don't change anything. They have their platform, they run their simulations, and my audits sit on top of it as an independent sort of gauge as to what is actually occurring. And on top of that, I provide a trend analysis that breaks users up into three separate groups. never clickers, learners, and movers. And the movers are the ones that continue to struggle. So the never clickers are obviously never click. The learners click earlier a few times or occasionally, but they're not really a problem. The movers will self-identify through this trend analysis into the focus group, and they tend to represent a very small amount in terms of a ratio. Anywhere from 8 to 12% that are responsible for over 60% of the cumulative clicks. So that's what I do. I do the auditing component and then the trend analysis so that my clients can strategize their training to attack both click rate and report rate. So if you take the never clickers and the learners and you push them and pat them on the back and tell them to report phishing, you're gonna draw up the report rate. And if you're focusing on just optimally addressing your training with the problem group, you're going to draw down the click rate, and you're actually going to improve your culture that way, because you're not really rubbing everyone the wrong way and forcing training on people that don't need it. So that's my short version. Sorry about the long intro.
No, it's fine. It's interesting. There's lots of talking points in there. I find this really interesting from a perspective of an apparent lack of long-term trend analysis, and really trying to see, look at the simulations plural as a whole, as opposed to individual exercises, because that just seems, I come from a scientific background. I have a physics degree. It seems insane for me, having had that, and it's possibly where the bias is, having had that kind of training, then to go, have a set of data and look at it and say, oh, well, the click rate's going down, so everything's fine, completely ignoring the fact that, have you made your simulations easier? Because then that will, like, over time, because that will contribute to a falling trend.
Yeah.
But then the fact that kind of analysis doesn't necessarily happen, or people don't think about that seems nuts.
Well, it happens inadvertently, in my opinion. So what happens is you get this new flashy simulator. You're going to pick the most compelling and the most contextually relevant simulations first. So let's say you're a Microsoft environment. You're going to do the SharePoint. You receive SharePoint. You've got a OneDrive, yada yada, and all that stuff. And it's contextually relevant, and it has breadth of interest across all of the people that are getting them, because those are the tools they use to work. And then as time goes on, the simulations that you're using, you start running out of ideas. You start picking stuff like Netflix password reset and stuff that, doesn't really apply to people at work, unless they use their Netflix account for their work account for their Netflix password, whatever.
Which happens.
So, yeah, exactly. So you basically fall into the game that the vendors want you to play, where you're naturally providing simulations of less complexity and less contextual relevance over time. So the metrics look like the trend's improving, but I always say to clients, oh, wait a second, go back to the ones that you started at the very beginning. You haven't run them for 2 years. Throw them out there and see what happens. And then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, wait a second, my 2% fish bone percentage is actually not, right?
Because people have got short memories too.
Pardon me?
People have short memories too.
No, for sure.
So they're gonna forget. They're not gonna. You could probably throw the exact same template at them twice in 6 to 8 months, and they're not gonna remember that. Oh, I've seen this before. A few might. A few be like, hang on a minute, this looks funny. But those are the kinds of people who are gonna pick it out anyway.
Yeah, I agree. Some might, but you got to think, how many emails do they get over that period of time?
And that's exactly the point. Like, it gets lost in.
Exactly. So that's basically, so just to be clear, what I do, like I run independently. I don't integrate with any platforms, and that is by design, because I want to bring an unbiased sort of view to the entire program, right? And to be honest with you, the vast majority of my clients, until the last couple of years, they've been exclusively in high-risk environments. I work with the Department of National Defense, government agencies, fintech, banking, things. The other industries, they're slowly starting to sort of come around, because they're starting to realize, hey, there's something fundamentally flawed here, right? Like, the industry's always sort of put the cart before the horse, excuse me. And like, if you're going to build an awareness program, it has to start with proper measurement framework, because the tools that the vendors provide you are agnostic tools. They don't run themselves. And if you don't have the guidance and the feedback and the proper auditing and constant incremental impact to tell you, cause and effect, this is working, that's not working, let's double down on this, let's stop doing that because it's not working, whatever. When you don't have that, you're playing into their game of basically just throwing as much crap against the wall and seeing what sticks, but then never knowing what's really sticking. So you're just creating more stickiness and engagement with their platform and just playing around with it for years and never really seeing the trend. This is why they like to use terms like foster a security culture, right? Does it get any more vague than that? Like you need measurement. You need objective measurement to be able to improve and drive improvement with what's measured properly. It's like that principle. I can't remember the business principle. You can't prove what you don't measure properly.
Oh, that's Drucker.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I
yeah.
remember it, but yeah. And I've heard everyone quotes them slightly differently to fit their certain narrative. But yeah, if you're not measuring something properly, it's difficult to improve it, right? You need that insight. Like in our industry, we like to call it insight, but it depends on how you quote Drucker, right? So, but yeah, that's what I've been doing. So I've noticed that over the last couple of years, the shift. It started, and that's when I started to get on LinkedIn because I was just doing my business quietly, just word of mouth, working with Canadian government entities, and then I started to notice this shift, and it started to occur when this whole sort of security theater thing started to crumble, right? So like a lot of vendors, not just awareness, they thrive on security theater, and they've been doing this for decades, where hey, we'll create these metrics, don't really say anything, but they're pretty and they look great on an interface and a dashboard. And the fact is 99% of our clients will never be targeted anyway. So, everyone thinks that, something's happening, it's working, everything's great. But now it's starting to shift, right? Like everyone's getting targeted. Sooner or later, you're going to get targeted. So this whole sort of security theater game is starting to crumble a little bit. And it's forcing a lot of leaders to step back and go, hey, let's not ask what we're using. Let's start asking, is it working? Right? And this is the shift that I'm starting to see because intuitively, within the high risk sectors I've been working, the leaders have always known that compliance cannot be the finish line. They can't risk a single incident, right? So intuitively, they understood this gap. But the rest of the industry, I feel like, is slowly starting to get it. And maybe it's my annoying posts. I don't know. Maybe that's part to do with it, right? I mean, I only have 3,000 followers, but maybe some people are seeing it.
You're a good way ahead of me, honestly. And I think it's needed because like what you're alluding to is really just like making our patch a little bit more professional, right? Like the type of loosey-goosey measurement but non-measurement, that theater, it wouldn't fly in a lot of other areas of a business that maybe have a bit longer of a pedigree, right? Like they've been at the executive table a little longer. They're used to having that quantifiable data to then come back and say, listen, this is part of a business case. We spent this amount of dollars to buy down this amount of risk, right? Or to support this opportunity, and this is the ROI there. I love to hear what you're doing. Because it's absolutely needed. You can't just go, I think this is helpful and cherry pick the data that makes it look the best, and that because folks are going to smell that. Right?
Well, they're really starting to sniff it out. They're really you just see it. You see people. There's like just this week already, like just since yesterday, I've noticed all this stuff about click rates are a useless metric and all that. And I'm like, I agree. They're useless the way vendors want you to use them. Sure. Vendors just want to use them to introduce more training, right? Click, go to training. Click, go to training. Right? And that's not really the way it should work. So with my trend analysis, it's only that 7 to 12%. It ranges anywhere from 5 to 15%, generally speaking. Like a new organization that hasn't had training before, I used to call it the 15-50 principle, where 15% represented 50% of the clicks cumulatively over a series. But as it matures, it'll go down to 560, 470, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's what you want. But those are the people you need to focus on and stop annoying everyone else. And then you won't have all these complaints about, negative security culture. I'm afraid to report. I want to fix my own problems, blah, 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 because people aren't afraid. They feel like they're part of the they feel like they're champions. They're part of the solution, right?
Bingo. Yeah. What we see so much is like, I already have so much training to do anyway. This is an additional thing that I kind of just don't really need. And
sure.
I mean, it's
it's a fair point. It's like, well, actually, let's go and look at the data. Oh, um, you've never fallen for a phishing simulation. In fact, you've reported every single one that you've done. We have it's relatively recent for us, but we call this group of people the unfishables. Makes it sound slightly like a crappy Sylvester Stallone movie, but hey, that's the name I went with.
Hey, listen, I'd watch that if it had Kevin Costner and with a hat on and suspenders. I always stop whenever it's on TNT. You stop it right now. I watch
the Unfishables 12.
Yeah.
But it's funny you mentioned that, Robin, because that's why I developed my program the way I did. Because I'm in Ottawa. A lot of my clients, when I first started this work in the federal government, and they have so much training. We have people who are retiring. They're late 50s, early 60s. They're taking French training the last 3 months of their public service because they were supposed to be bilingual. I think this is how useless and wasteful some of the training tends to be. And everyone's so frustrated with training. That's why I developed this program with scientific baselines. I have a geology degree, by the way, which this is the only thing that I've extracted from it, to be honest with you. Because as soon as I started learning this, I was like, wait a second, there's no scientific principles behind this. There's no scientific rigor. There's nothing. This is like calling this a baseline because it's the first simulation and assuming all fish are equal at the standard phases, like to standardize the phases of measurement. It's just silliness, right?
It feels like it's a metrics
baseline
based.
and it's It
feels like it's a metrics based veneer just to show the board, and then it, so that you can sort of like you'd say with the sort of the busy work kind of thing, so you can show that you're doing something, and everybody likes buying a product that's got a dashboard, but underneath it was kind of this sort of, and I might rile some people up as a HR grade wishy-washy. Well, we've got all the money, and so let's go and do this thing that's PR looks good, it's very positive, but we don't actually measure things on a normalized basis for the community that we're using or anything like that. We'll just kind of push out good thoughts and vibes, and that'll be the thing. And everybody will have to get on board with it, because if you don't get on board with it, then you're a bad person.
No, exactly. But at what point, right? With the way things are shifting now, at what point do you say, wait a second, we got to shift this a bit, right? Because that's said, all my clients, many, because I'm doing this over, I don't even know, 16, 17 years. Again, when I was using this tool called Point of Mail, which is kind of like MailChimp. That was my simulator before. I can't remember if it was Cofense or Wombat. Way long time ago, that came out with the phishing
Wombat. He said Wombat. Like, yeah, you're not, you know what you're doing, man. Like, these are shout outs that folks, just won't know unless they're in it, right?
Well,
like,
Wombat, proof point, right? But
we got people who are working with a shitter.
Yeah, and they claimed it was if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong here, right? So don't. Like they claim that it was the result of years of analysis and study at Carnegie Mellon University, yada, and this phishing simulator. And I'm like, it's an email marketing tool, man. I've been doing this for years.
It's like a configurable MailChimp, like with a couple more clicks that you could do. I hear you.
Yeah. So instead of sending out emails to your clients and they click, you know who they are, and they're a hot top client, you call them up, hey, buy my product. You're sending out phishing emails to simulations, and then when they hit the website, the fake login page, it's the exact same principle. It's the exact same metrics. Everything's identical, right? And they've added some things over the years, like the report button and stuff, which is great. But it's still on the same platform. It's still built on the same platform of email marketing tool. So I wonder how. It's funny because I wonder, there's so many new companies getting in the industry. I wonder how many have gone out and tried to build a simulator from scratch instead of just taking an email marketing platform and throwing another scam on it. Like maybe there's some people that will be listening to this going, Jesus Christ, I spent 2 years building this stupid platform and it was just email marketing. I
mean, it's like an anti-CRM, really. Like, all it's giving me is shades of like Agent Force, but to identify folks you want to like target versus, but target, but just in a different way, right? Versus selling them something like, here's some training we're foisting on you. Very broad brush. And again, like you said, the data nerd in me just perked up when you said baseline with a tinge of disgust, because it wasn't a scientifically rigorous baseline.
They still use the term.
For sure they do. And it's like, but like these sort of sciencey people are saying, no, my friends. And then but it does our industry a disservice because we'll go up to the board, we'll go up to people, and we'll say, listen, this is what we're doing. This justifies all this investment. And then when the inevitable occurs, and somebody gets got because we haven't been targeting, the right people with the right type of training, then it's, well, but we had everything in place. But we're, like you said, right, we're still getting taken, and there's certain industries, very regulated industries, that can't afford even just the one. So
No,
yeah, you're spot on, man.
yeah. And here's the other interesting thing. Like, and I'm not picking on any particular vendor because all the legacy vendors do the same thing, right? How do they address this? They try and give you what they call benchmarks. So like, here's your result to this simulation, and this is how it compares to others in your industry. But if you look at it, and I'm sure Robin and Omar, you guys will get this because from a science background, when you start asking scientifically rigorous questions and say, well, wait a second, a benchmark theoretically is an aggregate of client level baselines. Like, you can't have benchmarks you just pull out your arse and then not have client level baselines, right? But if you had client level baselines, that's far more valuable to each organization than benchmarks, because benchmarks are unverifiable, but baselines you can measure against your own performance. What do you care how you compare to like other organizations in your industry if you can compare your own results and measure from your own baseline incrementally every month per se, so that you can guide your program and auto-correct it to continuously drive improvement, right? That just makes no sense. So the whole thing is kind of flawed. And like, I don't want to make any accusations here, but where do these benchmarks really come from? Like this, it's a serious question somebody needs to start asking, right?
Can we dig into, because this is one of those, I mean, we get it because we're in the weeds on this, the difference between the benchmark and the baseline. But the uninitiated, it's a subtle, there's a nuanced kind of difference there. We tease out what we're really meaning by this, because that is something that's probably going to just go for a lot of people.
Yeah. So in my opinion, the way I look at it is benchmarks and comparisons to benchmarks are vertical siloed disparate metrics. Like, you run one campaign, you get a bunch of benchmark comparisons, and that's great. That's how you compare to others for that specific scenario. Wrap it up, toss. It has no value in terms of telling you how you're progressing.
Right? Here's how we did on a Microsoft simulation.
It has value still, right? But
Yeah.
And I can get to that in a minute. Then you run the next one, you get your benchmark, you get your snapshot metric. It's disparate, it's separate, it's not unrelated because the simulation complexity is completely different now. You're not comparing apples to apples. Toss it out, run another one, right? Then you just continue this process, and it's activity metrics and it's engagement. You think you're getting somewhere. That's benchmarks. Baseline is a completely different thing. You're now taking these vertical metrics and you're looking at them horizontally. Now you're looking at it in terms of longitudinal impact. You create a baseline. You reset that baseline every time you run a campaign. And this is my auditing, right? I'm not talking about the platforms. I reset the baseline every time I run a campaign. So every time I run a campaign, looking forward, I have a new baseline. But looking back to previous results, I have incremental impact. How far have we come since the last campaign? How far have we come since 2 campaigns ago? 3, 4, 5. How far have we come since the beginning? Incremental impact, horizontal. That's baseline. In the industry, they play this game where you'll see a lot of marketing where they use the term benchmark and baseline in the same paragraph synonymously and all this stuff, and they just constantly play this word salad and mix people up. And the fact is, baselines are horizontal, benchmarks are vertical. Baselines, you can't argue it. It should be the basis of any awareness program so that you can drive continuous improvement. You can't use tools that have no sort of measurement, agnostic tools, without having some sort of guidance, and that's the main difference, right? But I will argue there is value, because I've had these arguments in conversations with vendor evangelists and stuff, right? And there is value in knowing how your people react to, say, a vendor email compromise. Right? If you have a vendor and you run a simulation where you're mimicking a vendor with an attachment, and you want to know if your finance people are going to react to that, there's value. The real value would be if you create a baseline doing that, and then you have incremental impact metrics telling you the people have improved. So it's one thing to know how they're going to react. It's another thing to know if they're improving. So this is the subtle difference between what I do and what the industry is doing, right? So There's value in the individual campaigns, but the real value is in the horizontal campaigns and being able to track impact. So the difference between impact and activity is the way I like to look at it.
Gotcha. Yeah. And it's one of those things. It's funny. I was actually talking about. I was talking to my PT physical therapist earlier about this in terms of the way that things are not normalized or like consistent, like you say, on the longitudinal basis. If you're going to, you know, people are going to get the same stuff. Oh, broadly speaking, they're going to get the same sorts of stuff over and over again because the moment a threat actor knows that an organization is a Microsoft shop, which that's not a hard guess because it's like 90% plus. Yeah, exactly. Right. Then that's a lot of what they're going to get. If they know that, you know, threat actor knows that a particular place uses this is heavily Oracle database, it's probably what the IT guys are going to get. These individuals are likely going to ignore AWS if they don't use it, for example, because they'll go, why am I getting anything from here? And it's just weird the way it's one of those,
right?
Sorry?
There's no relevance to that, right?
Yep.
No, exactly. And it's weird the way that, and when you say that, that makes perfect sense. You know, people will go like, yeah, obviously. And they go, so then why are you not practicing it? Because it is one of those things that people just don't do, but they go, when you say it to them, they go, oh yeah, well, obviously. It's like, okay, well, practice what you preach or what you've just agreed with.
Yeah. Well, it's a herd mentality, right? Like the industry was created by Wombat and Fish Me at the time, now co-founders. So they really created it. And maybe I'm there's a few others in there that I don't remember, but those are the main players. And they've driven this industry for 20 years with self-assessments, and that's the way they want to run it. The problem is when you're running a platform with agnostic tools that don't run themselves, you don't want to be accountable for the clients that don't use them properly. There's no incentive to create a performance measurement framework that if 50% of your clients are just running one campaign a quarter and just doing annual training, you're just going to make yourself look bad, right? So, and I expose that with my audits too. Like I'll tell people, and I've had clients that are like, well, how come the metrics aren't getting better? And it's like that. It's not my job to make the metrics get better. It's my job to tell you how your program is performing, and I can make recommendations to you like, do more campaigns, like do more phishing specific training, simplify the phishing training, don't hammer people with phishing, just get away from that stuff and teach people about scams in general, 4 simple steps for all phishing and deepfake, that kind of thing. Like, because the people that are struggling, they don't give a crap about definitions. That's a conversation for professionals to map specific attacks to technical controls. It's not meant to be part of training, right? And this is the type of advice I'll give people, but it's not my responsibility to make it work, but I can definitely guide them on how to do it better and to optimize it with the least amount of operational disruption.
Yeah, this is the thing. It's funny you say that about the terminology. It's something that, because it goes adjacent to lots of people of, I don't know, I'd say like edgy, disruptive disposition saying, do away with all the jargon like completely. And I was doing a slide deck the other day actually for a talk I'm doing in a couple of weeks that it says to the point, it says exactly that, like, oh, there's too much jargon. And I go, well, wait a minute, there's value in jargon. With technical people who, it shortens conversations. If we're going to say security event incident management every single time we need to, as opposed to saying SEAM, I'm going to lose my mind because that's a lot of syllables.
Exactly.
It's way easier, but it's understand where to use that terminology and jargon and where you are going to lose people and where you're going to, what's the word I'm looking for? God,
blow their cognitive load.
I mean, that's, just have them check out, right? Like, and it's one of those things where you have to thread that needle, right? Like, as you said, I really loved how you kind of made the differentiation where, why would the professionals, right? Why would folks in this space want to still use that jargon? Brilliantly put, right? Because then I'll know, okay, if it's this type of phishing, these are the types of controls that I'm gonna look at, right? This is what this is what we have to mitigate against versus, folks are just, and now I think that's getting accelerated by the tools now, out there on the adversary side, right? You have to teach folks just how to spot a scam because a lot of the time, a lot of things we would shout out to look at for a phishing email just aren't there anymore because AI's, made them really pretty. AI's made that, change all the grammatical mistakes, right? All those little things that you're saying. No, you have to take a step back now, simplify the training, as you said, and tell them, listen, is somebody trying to rush you to a decision? That should be a big flag, right? Like just, it came up this morning though, and it was funny, like, fighting deepfakes and whatnot, but similar concept, right? Just like take a step back and look at the situation. Would your CEO be reaching out to you to buy, gift cards, right? Like, why? Like, have they never
above you?
Have they never called exactly?
Have
they never called you before? And then the one time they call you, they need you to run an errand for them at Target. Like that's, take a step, regardless of how it comes across. Because if you put that in their minds, they get it via text, it's one thing. If they get it in an email, then no, that's BS, right? If they get a call and it sounds like them, because that's possible now, or deepfakes, then still doesn't matter. Like he wouldn't be calling.
Yeah.
I think
but the most important point, man, it's pause to verify. Pause to verify is the only thing that cyber criminals have no control over. They can play around with email address, they can play around with domains, they can what's that attack where they Cyrillic attacks where they looks like
they embed the
but they cannot force you to not pause to verify, right? So if you were to whittle it down to one simple skill, pause to verify, and that goes across everything. Like I kind of encourage my clients when it comes to deep fakes to teach their staff how to do dynamic questions, because the standard security awareness training advice is, set up a safe word with your colleagues and families, and nobody ever does it. No one's ever going to do it. Like no one ever does it, right? It's a great idea, but no one does it. But if you teach people how to ask dynamic questions that only the real person can answer, now you have something that you can apply that just by knowing it, it's fully implemented. So like, if my daughter called me and started asking me weird questions, I'd be like, okay, so how's your sister, right? Because she doesn't have a sister. So that would be the way to deal with that. We're stuck in a situation where you haven't set up your safe word. So I'm always looking for simpler ways to train people and simpler strategies. Again, I'm not responsible for the result, but I give this to my clients. Like, dumb it down. This 5, 10, 15% of people, they're overwhelmed. This is why they're clicking on stuff, right? So like, dumb it down to, like, I give them this 4 steps, HELP, right, which just stands for hover over email, link, and pause to verify. And like, these are the 4 steps. That's it. All phishing, all ishings, all deepfakes. Help. HELP. That's it, right? And I'm not saying that's not the
that's it. Right.
But it is it is the best approach for the people that are constantly struggling.
100%.
It's something simple, right? So
yeah, definitely. I think that also. I mean, you said it a few times now, that the 5 to 15%. I completely believe that, because I've been doing the longitudinal look at all of our phishing data recently, and of all the people that Omar and I work with at our day job, over time, about 10% are the ones who. It's about 10% who have only 10% who have ever even clicked one out of probably like a dozen. And then the other 90% are either like our unfishables, who incidentally, when we ask them what's the thing that you do that you would share with colleagues that helps you be, to date, unfishable, same 2 things: be suspicious, which in essence is take time, pause, and it's when it's specifically because we ask this in the context of the email phishing simulations, it's look at the email address. Look at very little else, but look specifically at the email address and the display name, and if that matches. Because that display name, yes, very easy to spoof. But the actual domain itself, domain spoofing, it's possible. Technical people of a very high skill level will say, "Oh, it's trivial." It's like, it's not trivial for some bloke in Nigeria or Bangladesh who's vibe coding from an AI model. That's not what their skill set is. So the email domain is probably going to be off. And it's amazing how they almost all of them came back with something like along those lines.
Yeah, because it's amazing how often you'll see like a perfectly replicated phishing, like perfect. The logos are in the right place, the colors of the logos, everything. And then
The Coinbase ones I'm getting.
email account, right? It's a Gmail account. And it's so
Yep.
obvious, like to us. But if you don't teach people, so one of the things that I think has become a bad habit over the years is the way phishing training's been done by legacy vendors. Look for spelling errors. You got people playing Where's Waldo. Their eyes are shifting all over the trade center. Looking right? It's these clues are not there anymore. So like, where do the clues tend to remain? Email address. If there's a link, it's going to be in the root domain. Go to the first forward slash, 2 periods. That's it. Don't focus on anything else. And then pause to verify. Like, if you always pause to verify, and then pause to verify can be quite the skill, right? You could do a whole course on that, right? Sure. Like you get something from your login directly. You get something from a colleague, use another approved communication channel. Like if you guys use Slack as an approved channel, contact them through Slack. Like these skills, but I feel like training should be focused on those skills specifically and almost exclusively, not hammering people with more content with this throw crap against the wall sort of philosophy, because that's where you're losing them, right? It just plays to what they want, more and more content, these great ideas. Try this, try that. I found that this really moves the needle, everyone says, but like, does it, right? Does it really move the needle if you're just confusing people, right? And then there's hack lore, with this stuff about like, baristas and Wi-Fi and don't leave laptop here. Like I've seen like entire modules that go on for a half an hour, followed up with a cheat sheet that's got like 37 points.
A quick digestible cheat sheet, right, Kerry?
Yeah, the 38 point is when you get back from vacation, check in with IT to see if you need anything else that should have been done, right? Like,
and all of IT,
because IT are gonna hate you.
Yes, exactly. All of IT is going to be like, you're making a ticket for this. I hate you. I'm never picking up your phone call. I'm never answering your chat message. Don't do this. Who sent you? I want names.
Who's telling you to do this? I'm busy enough as it is already.
Oh, Christ. Oh no, that's terrible.
That is one of those things that I think that it kind of goes a little bit like the wayside. It's like make help desk, make the service desk your friends, because they are the ones doing a good portion of your work from fending off well, not fending off necessarily, because that's treating like the end users as a pain, but it's handling the end user queries to triage them and figure out what's actually relevant for you as a security individual.
They're usually like, the help desk is a wonderful partner, as you know, right? You've been in the game long enough where it can really make or break like any tech enhancements, any modifications, any changes. They're going to be that first line. So building or rolling something out with them in mind is essential to success, right? Like you learn it the hard way. Maybe there was many moons ago, right? Cowboys, they were just like, we're going to upgrade our MFA, not tell anyone, right? Like, yeah, but how does that work? How exactly immediately, right? That response is all you need to know in terms of how that worked out for you. Bold strategy, Cotton. But it's so just doing it with that in mind, and then also it's a two-way street, right? Because the help desk many times, right, Robin, has beautiful tips in terms of like what the people are actually seeing, as you're pointing out, Kerry, like not this pseudo like self-congratulatory metrics or thing. No, this is what actual users are complaining about and seeing. It's going to be things that we didn't think of. It's going to be things that we didn't cover, and so you want that two-way comms with them. But help desk here is phenomenal.
And help desk people, don't forget, they have the attention of people at the right time, right? And it's like, it's hard to get these people's attention, but when they're calling in with a problem, they're focused on the problem, and that message has got to be crystal clear and to the point, right?
Yep, and consistent.
A few better ways to get good, like honest feedback out of someone when they're pissed off. Like it might be a bit raw and a bit brash, but you'll find out what they really want, what they really think.
Yeah.
Switching gears ever so slightly. Pivoting off something you said about the baristas and the Wi-Fi and all that sort of stuff, because that's real thin end of the wedge stuff, and it drives me. I'm going to throw some shade here, like the guy 0 Day on like Instagram and YouTube and wherever. I can't remember his actual name. Is like clearly very talented guy. I feel like just fearmongers like hell with just constant like, this stuff is so dangerous. It's like, yeah, but do you you as the person who's deep in all of this, people who've happened to this. How many of the average people have actually encountered that How many people do they know who have encountered that? How many people do they know who knows someone who's encountered that? It's very small. The North Korean spies thing, because you put a LinkedIn post up about a week ago about the Gen AI backed remote work stuff. Bullshit in your opinion? Please, come on, give us that.
Sometimes we just want to stir the pot a bit, but it's like it's so. I don't know what the angle is there. What whoever's bringing this stuff in, we all know who it is, right? Why they're bringing it to the forefront, and what they're going to sort of suddenly tell us is their solution, right? They're like, well, now we've got it, the North Korean deepfake, solution, whatever, right? Like it who knows what that angle is, but like with Security Awareness Month coming, like I always cringe because I have a lot of great contacts, and then I see some friends, quote unquote friends, like LinkedIn contacts, and they start posting stuff like, beware of public charging stations, and then I'm like, oh my god, hey, I wish I didn't see that, right? Because I'm terrible at just not saying something, right? And it's like, well, some guy on Fox News, like he was on there and he said the FBI said this is a major deal. Blah, blah. It's like, oh my,
That's funny because he's a former guest.
what's that?
That's funny because he's a former guest. It's Eric
Oh my
Cole.
god! Like when you,
But hey, look, we have varying different opinions, and that's that. It's a melting pot.
but my point is when you fill people's heads with things that they're just so unlikely to see, and like it isn't reality in some cases, right? I don't want to comment on that particular report on Fox News or whatever it was, but like when you start filling people's heads with stuff that they're never going to see, you're taking away from the stuff that they're going to see. Like you're wasting cognitive load on nonsense, so they tune out when it's important, right? Like now it's something now important. You need to focus on this phishing thing. It's like, hey, you guys again, piss off, like this is what they're saying.
Yeah, because that thin end of the wedge thing never happened, so you were just scaremongers. It's like, no, it's not us. It was them. It was those scaremongers, people who do scaremongering. We were telling you the relevant stuff, but you didn't want to hear because it wasn't sexy.
Exactly. Or the public Wi-Fi dangers and stuff. It's like anything that you're doing on the internet that is sensitive at all is going to be encrypted nowadays. I mean, maybe 15 years ago,
it was a different story. Yeah.
Nowadays, like I just can't think of anything that you're going to do that's sensitive that's not going to be encrypted. So it doesn't matter if it's intercepted or there's a man in the middle. It's completely irrelevant. Like, and this is just more of that stuff that is filling people's heads. Like, do you know Bob Lord? He said he coined the term hack lore. So that when I use the term, I should get credit for it. And he writes about this stuff all the time, right? About hack lore and fear mongering and FUD and making up stuff that isn't real, and there's a lot of it. And when Security Awareness Month comes in October, you'll see it. I find the first 2 weeks it's like, oh, there's some great advice here, and then the last 2 weeks people start bringing up stuff from their vendor that they got, as they're looking up things like, oh, no one spoke about this for a while, and then you start hearing this hack lore stuff. So.
It's a good kind of round the campfire scary story kind of thing, built off. Because loads of those things, like there is a slight root of truth in them, but lots of things got embellished. Like I always see the Wi-Fi thing or the charging cable stuff as bear in mind that can happen. Don't worry too much about it.
Yeah,
it's like bear in mind that it can happen on the grounds that if you do connect to a public Wi-Fi spot or use a public charging port, and something weird happens, you can go, wait a minute, I've heard about this. But don't be like afraid of them, because then that's now just hampering your actual like day-to-day life.
Exactly.
And I think you gain more credibility when, just anecdotally, right? So, you go to whatever family function, somebody comes in and goes, hey, did you hear this, right? Carry, to your point, like the thing on Fox News, or just on any like clickbaity, this sort of happened. And, I find that I've gained more credibility with, even family members who might not, like me that much, right? Like they're just making small talk with the tech stuff. I go, listen, that's wild. And like, I've called it like, hey, that's like a triple axle, right? But like the regular skating stuff that you're going to face is going to be this, and this. That's the stuff that freaks me out. And heck, it's more of what we see that people still fall for. Not saying that I can't like appreciate the aesthetic beauty right? To belabor the analogy even a bit further, right? Of said triple axle. It's cool, and the technologist in me thinks that was dope. Like they pulled that off, or not targeted at my current day job here, but that was neat. But it's really like the meat and potatoes, just like the simple stuff that's more that happens at scale.
Exactly.
That makes me cry. Yeah.
They want the people that are going to, what's the term I'm looking for? They want the people that are going to be easily fooled, right? In some cases.
Sure.
But yeah, I think things are shifting very quickly. I think that, back to my point originally, like I think people need to be more aware of security theater and start thinking more critically in the industry about vendor claims, metrics. Like look at your metrics, man. Like especially in security awareness, look at your metrics. If you have some beautiful constellation chart and it's pretty, it's got all kinds of eye-popping colors, just ask yourself one question. Does any of this tell me if my phishing training is working?
Period.
And I know it's not all about phishing, and that's what human risk management platforms will argue. It's not just about phishing, but it's like my argument back is like, wait a second. If you can't prove your training is working to reduce phishing, and you can't show me incremental impact from baselines with phishing, where the vast majority of breaches start, then why should I believe any of your other stuff?
And that's huge, and that's really what the credibility piece, right? Like so I said the anecdotal like person to person, but at the enterprise level, two things, right? That credibility and the trust, and also like how then do you have the stones to go back and ask for more money, and that you're taking away from the mission of whatever organization you happen to be doing cybersecurity in, like unless you're blessed to be in one of those orgs where cybersecurity is the service that you're doing, but in 99.9% of the cases you're supporting another mission. How am I going to go and say, you know what, those dollars have to come my way? Well, okay, cool. Prove that you did decent things with the previous sack of cash that I gave you. And if you can't do that, that's why in many cases, right, we're put at the kiddie table when it comes to executive decision making. Like you have to have that rigor if you want to be taken seriously.
And again, if you really look at your metrics and you really look at your dashboards and you look at it from that critical eye, what is it telling me? You're going to find it's 99% activity and very little to do with insight that is actionable. And I'm not talking just awareness. You can go on. You can talk about firewalls. You can just go on and on and on. And there's just so much noise that it's detrimental now because again, the scales have tipped. Like this game of security theater, we're not going to get attacked anyway. It's just not. It's not like that anymore. And it's specifically speaking with awareness because that's really my forte. When I talk to vendors about how they measure impact, it makes me laugh. Like some of the stuff, it's just they can never just tell you a simple formula, or they can never just be completely transparent. Always like, well, we do this, and then we take new employees, and we remove the outliers, and then we do this algorithm against this and that. And it's like, what the heck? What? Like, what are you talking about?
If you got to do that sort of gymnastics, right, to prove value to me, then, man, like it's very, very slim value margin there. Like if you got to do so many permutations, there's so many caveats, there's so many carve outs. Like, the scientific piece, right? As a geologist, if you're looking at that paper and you're reading that stuff, and there's like, the next steps or the results section starts with that preamble on, the sun has to be in this position and to do this and to do that, and it's not reproducible, so then it's really not applicable to the field itself. Then it's a garbage piece of science.
Well, that's exactly it. And if you think about our industry, how much marketing has bungled people's minds with like I don't even think most people understand the difference between objective and subjective metrics, quantifiable metrics. They don't understand the basic definition, baseline and benchmark, the differences between the two. These terms are just thrown around synonymously. The measurable outcomes. What the hell does that mean? Like I see this all the time. Measurable outcomes. Are they subjective, objective, quantifiable? Are they scientific? Are they based on scientific rigor? Do they come from baselines, true baselines, or the premise that the first campaign is a baseline and all fish are equal? Like explain it to me, right? And then that's when the data scientists come out and it's all convoluted and confusing. it's just a bit of a mess, right? I'm trying to simplify that world as much as I can.
No, and it's very much needed, I think, with especially when, going back to, Robin's niche and purview in our 9 to 5, like that's really where a lot of this nonsense gets in. Still to this day, like it's just straight away. All the other stuff is needed, right? You don't want to go out there and not have it, right? Maybe run a bit better. To your point, Kerry, absolutely agree there. But you can live or die based on just a few successful phishing campaigns that wreak havoc once they get in.
Exactly.
At which point, all of your rebranding things like pig butchering scams to something slightly more fluffy and approachable to people is worth for nothing. Because I did want to, before we finish, I know we're about up on time. I did want to get to the it's a different HRification of security awareness, which is the human risk management bit of it, and that kind of rebranding. I get the sense you'd be on the same page as us with that, in that it's kind of just a distracting waste of time with all the rebranding. Or have you got, or do you see there's value in it?
To be honest with you, there's so many new ones out there. I haven't reviewed all of them, but my sort of consensus so far with the ones I had, and I've looked at the major players out there without naming any. I'm sure you know which ones, any of them on Gartner. The first problem is still there. It's vendor self-assessment, right? Mm-hmm. And the second problem is when they start using terms like measurable outcomes and stuff, they're telling me immediately the issue is that it's built on subjective means. So like when you take a metric and you make it quantifiable, they're fooling a lot of people into thinking that means it's objective. Now, objective metrics are always quantifiable, but quantifiable metrics are not always objective. If they're built subjective means, then they're kind of useless, right? And give you an example, 8 out of 10 people agree with me. That's 80%, right? 80% of people agree with me that subjective quantifiable metrics are not objective. And I did analysis of 10 people and 8 agree with me. And they're my best friends who always agree.
But you're not far off, Kerry. And there's this. I'm only chuckling because, especially that last line that you said, that very powerful, right? With the subjective, objective differentiation, right? And the quantifiable. But you're not wrong, man. Like a lot of this is built on. It's almost like, you ever remember those movie posters where you would get and you would know this is a complete and utter crap movie, but you would have somebody that said, hey, riveting, right? Or like, so always you had little bite, right? And it's like, wait a second, are we doing that in our own industry? To a certain extent, I think you agree, like we are.
Yeah.
We're allowing it to happen.
We are. I mean, I would even take it so far as to say that within our industry, we have a lot of social engineering by vendors on the industry.
Yep. I agree.
I mean, no other way to put it. And you can take it a step further and say all marketing is somewhat, kind of social engineering at scale, really. But we are social engineering the industry by telling people all these activity metrics measurable outcomes when they're not really measuring anything but activity with the platform. And it's a problem that needs to be addressed, and it needs a better solution. It needs best practice. Like you're not gonna do your SOC 2 audit with your MSSP, right? You're not gonna do that. Right? So why are we allowing this sort of self-assessment from vendors? It makes literally no sense. And it's not something that you can argue. It's just factual. I know it ruffles some feathers, and the evangelists, they never like my comments and stuff, and all that. So I get it. Their job is to maintain the status quo. That little up at the top there.
You're saying the emperor. You're saying the emperor's naked, man. Of course they're going to get on you, right? Like you're saying, like, wait a second, but it's needed, right? And honestly, with the amount of money, and now, as you said, right, there was a nugget in there earlier in the call where you go, now more and more of different types of vendors and niches are getting targeted. So it's much more widespread. It can potentially be more dire, right? Down the road when, like some major metropolitan areas, water access is jacked up for a week or two because of some nonsense like this, right? Like it's going to matter at that point. So we might as well do ourselves a favor and try to rectify it now.
Yeah, exactly. Just start. We just got to start thinking critically. We got to stop assuming that the vendors have our best interests at heart. The vendors have their own interests at heart.
They have shareholders, man. They have.
They're going to give you if they're going to tell you only the report rate matters. Okay, why? Well, because it speaks to engagement. So you're telling me that you only want us to look at engagement with your platform. Well, no, I don't mean it that way. Well, that's it makes no sense to say one is more valuable than the other. The only way to really improve your security posture against phishing is to drive up your report rate and drive down your click rate, and to use simulations that challenge people, not simulations that manipulate the results. It's just as simple, right?
When they're saying engagement, it's because the damn platform's optimized for that. That's 1,000%. Back to your point, right, where it's like a lot of these tools were essentially like phishing or email marketing tools, but souped up, right? And, put spandex on them, right? Now they're tough security tools, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And then every time someone fails, it introduces them to their new engaging training. Everyone's always bragging about engaging training.
Yeah.
No, you don't want people actually having to get through the training, because you want
100%.
them to be spotting the email in the first place. Very. I got a bulletproof solution to give you: a 0% click rate, or near to 0% click rate, and like a 70% report rate. It's, you construct the email, say, this is a phishing test. Don't click this link. If you report it, you will be entered into a raffle for a new car. Fucking well easy, right? But then that's what I think, and I'll set this up as a closer for you to knock out of the park for because we're almost out of time. Is phishing. I think that speaks to the fact that people think that phishing and phishing simulations is really easy, and they're not. They're absolutely littered with nuance and far harder and more intricate than anyone necessarily gives them credit for at the beginning. So what else can you add to that? And if anyone needs your services for exactly that reason, where can they find you?
Well, right now, the best way to get me is on LinkedIn. So what I'm doing right now is I'm rebuilding my actual website. I used to have a little bit of a focus on training years ago, and I need to update that. To make a long story short, all my business over the years has been strictly word of mouth within the government, within D&D, stuff like that. So I'm just now trying to. I feel like I'm a startup again, like 20 years ago when I started, and I was just ball rolling, because I'm trying to expand out into new markets and get away from just the government for many reasons. One of the main ones being bottlenecking, where they like to do everything at one time of the year, which makes it hard to add clients other times of the year. But you can get me on LinkedIn, Cary Johnson, Fish Busters. I'll be updating my website soon. And what was the other part? So was I supposed to nail it?
Insofar as the perceived ease and nuance of the perceived ease of phishing simulations and all the training that goes around it, how else do you think that is such a misconception, and what are the biggest things that you see that people need to pay attention to?
Oh yeah. So the thing, one thing I will say about awareness programs, I can tell from talking to you guys already, you have a very mature program. Your people are pretty phish resistant, and you've gotten there the hard way, the way vendors want you to do it, throwing crap against the wall, constantly throwing things, because you never had a way to measure it incrementally from baselines. So what I bring to the table is what a lot of organizations have taken many, many years to do. I can help organizations do in 6 months to a year, because I'm giving them that incremental impact horizontally. Because I'm sure if I came in and did an audit for you guys, the baseline would be fairly low. So the point I'm trying to make is awareness programs work. Problem is they're not efficient, and nobody knows how well they're working. Right? That's where I can come in and I can optimize a program. So large organizations, you guys are in healthcare, you guys get it, your high risk sector. You guys have been hammering away at this awareness stuff forever, and kudos, because it's been working, right? Other industries that are a little smaller, like 500 to 2,000 employee kind of a thing, where they have less resources, they don't quite have the security team and the maturity to handle a human risk management platform or a large security awareness training platform. That's where I really shine, where I can come in and say, Let's run a bunch of campaigns. Let's identify who really needs training and focus just on them as a manageable group.
Yeah.
Kind of
And
answering
essentially,
about
do the thing that the phishing simulation vendors should be doing themselves, but they won't.
Well, no, they want you to think everyone's a problem, right? That's the big thing with human risk management. Everyone's a potential problem. Everyone. So that everyone has their own risk score.
And strictly speaking, yes, they are. But how many of them are actually worth like the effort needed to? You're dealing with, what's the word I'm looking for? You're dealing with marginal marginal gains as you go.
Yeah.
It's all flattens out. You're talking about all of these people are like lots and lots of effort for not an awful lot of change in their behavior because they're already pretty good.
Yeah, no, exactly. But that's the game that they want you to play. Just keep engaging, keep adding, keep doing more, right? And without that insight, knowing exactly where you're going with stuff, you don't see the trends. You'll see them long term, but if you want to see them quicker, you want to see them more efficiently. That's what I do. It's been a pleasure, guys. I really appreciate it, man.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
Kerry.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Fun. It was. Stay in touch.
Excellent. Will
You
do.
too.
Will do. It's a pleasure having you on the show, and we hope to have you back again because I think we could probably talk all evening on this kind of thing. But
Yeah.
I love talking about this stuff, and it was
Same
fun.
here. Thank
All right,
you.
bye.
excellent
See ya.
stuff. Thanks. Cheers.
Bye.